Once again, good morning everyone. I've called this press conference today to report on Bermuda's crime report for the second quarter of 2010, which is a period between the 1st of April and the 30th of June. Sadly, there will be no surprise that violent crime, particularly gun crime, remains consistently high. Gang clashes and the use of firearms continues to dominate the police crime blotter. They receive the highest attention from the media and the highest concern from local residents. This is rightly so, as these crimes cause the greatest harm to the community and pose the greatest risk to public safety. Since they are on everyone's mind, I will deal with that part of the report first. So looking at firearms incidents, there were 17 confirmed firearms incidents reported in the second quarter. That is the same number that was reported in the first quarter. Those 17 incidents resulted in 4 deaths and 6 injured victims. That brings the total for the first half of 2010 to 6 fatal shootings and 14 injury shootings. The long-term trend for firearms is increasing at a substantial rate. The total of confirmed incidents for the first half of 2010 is 34, which has nearly eclipsed the total for the whole year of 2009, which was 37. Now, just to put a little bit of perspective on this, May 2009 for us marks the beginning of the spike of gun crime that we're still experiencing, commencing with the shooting death of Kenwande Robinson. And since then, in the preceding 13 months, we have seen 10 victims who have been shot and killed, 27 victims that have been shot and injured. And this total of 37 victims accounts for 30 separate investigations. Obviously, some cases had multiple victims. We've seen charges laid in 8 of the investigations so far, resulting in 10 people charged, 3 charges of murder, 6 charges of attempted murder, and 1 conviction so far for causing shooting injuries. Our detection rate has increased significantly in the first 2 quarters of this year, but we still have a distance to go. As always, I take advantage of every opportunity to thank the public for their assistance to date, to recognize the courage of those victims and witnesses that are taking the stand at court, and to encourage the rest of the public to do their part in providing the information that is required to bring the remaining offenders to justice. Looking at the broader perspective of this statistical report, we'll start with 4 main categories. The first is crimes against the person. The second quarter report of 217 crimes is only slightly higher than the 5-year average of 2009. And while this number is still unacceptably high, it is not increasing dramatically. And it remains within the normal range since 2005. The recent increase can be attributed to significant rises over the last quarter in murders, robberies, and sexual assault. Second main category is crimes against the community. This category is down from the last quarter from 254 to 233, but it still remains at the top end of the 5-year average of 196. The long-term trend is downwards. And the downward trend is brought about by a large decrease of antisocial behavior, but that's slightly offset by an increase in disorder offenses. Third category is crimes against property. This category has actually dropped through the floor. The number of crimes has fallen from 720 to 617 since the last quarter. It is in fact the lowest record for more than 5 years. It falls below the normal 5-year average. And this category has seen continual decreases in residential, commercial, and tourist burglaries, as well as criminal damage, theft, and fraud reports. The exceptionally low number can be attributed, although anecdotally, to a combination of targeting prolific offenders, increased crime prevention awareness amongst the public, and an increased police presence on the streets. The last main category is total crime, and not surprisingly, this number is down as well. Total crime is on a downward trend, and it's down for the 3rd straight quarter. Total crime reported fell from 1,185 to 1,067 since the last quarter. It is the lowest record for more than 5 years. and it falls outside and below the normal 5-year range. It is mainly driven by the significant drop in property crime, and this otherwise piece of good news is sadly spoiled by the escalating gun crime. In terms of other activity, drug enforcement activity and drug seizures have actually gone through the roof. Drug enforcement has been rising for 6 quarters in a row, and it is significantly above the normal band. 279 drug seizures were made in the second quarter, and that has more than doubled in the last 18 months. The figure includes 55 seizures at the ports of entry by the staff of the Customs Department, 7 seizures included overseas law enforcement agencies where the drugs were destined for Bermuda, and 217 local street seizures. A total of $4.3 million worth of drugs was seized in the second quarter, and that's up from the first quarter of $1.6 million. The total value includes $2.5 million worth of cannabis, $1.4 million worth of cocaine and crack cocaine, and $933,000 worth of heroin. Other enforcement activity in terms of stop and searches: we stopped and searched 1,708 people in the second quarter. This is the highest record to date. It's nearly 3 times what it was a year ago. And we can attribute the rise to increase in powers in the amendments, the recent amendments to PACE and the Criminal Code. Arrests remain high and steady at more than 1,300 arrests per quarter. This quarter includes the arrest of 228 females and 82 juveniles. And the top 5 reasons for arrest start with arrest on court warrant, which accounts for 50% of all arrests. Drugs is number 2, followed by impaired driving, assault, and antisocial behavior. About 11%, or 148 people, were recidivist arrests, where they were arrested more than one time in the same 3-month period. On the traffic enforcement front, traffic enforcement remains above average at more than 13,000 tickets issued in the second quarter. That translates to 3,000 traffic tickets and 10,000 parking tickets. Road traffic collisions: there were 4 fatal collisions in the second quarter, and that brings this year's total to 6 fatal collisions. The long-term trend of traffic collisions overall is decreasing, and the second quarter of 626 collisions is below the 10-year average of 740. Now that's a lot of information, a lot of facts and figures that I've thrown at you. In terms of what perspective or what message we'd like to send out, if I had to summarize all of that, we would say that gun crime clearly continues to dominate the report with an alarming and increasing rate. There is still more work to be done across the community. Public assistance, however, is on the rise, and that's evidenced by more cases coming before the courts. Police enforcement across drugs, searches, and arrests continues to set all-time record highs, and traffic collisions have stabilized at a comparatively lower rate than in recent years. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. At this time, we'll take questions in orderly fashion, so we're going to have hands. First question, okay?
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Senators noted in the Senate yesterday that there's been a raft of landmark legislation in Bermuda in the past few months, I believe in the last quarter. That includes the Parental Responsibility Act, amendments to the Bail and Firearms Act, wiretapping and the ban on cell phones while driving. How do you anticipate that's going to impact on the next batch of statistics, and how will you be utilising that?
Well, I wouldn't like to predict at this point, only because we're still evaluating the operational impact that all of that legislation has across the board. We have to take a structured approach to that. So once legislation is passed, we have to look at the training requirements for our staff and whether or not any infrastructure support is required, new forms, new tickets, that type of thing. So the effect might not be felt until the end of the third quarter, because it takes us a little bit of lag time to get our house in order to be able to respond to the change in legislation.
Do you anticipate it's going to be able to help you put people away in the end?
Well, certainly that's the intention of all the different pieces of legislation. They're either designed to help us with the investigation, or they give us more investigative opportunities. In the case of the Bail Act, it allows us to keep closer monitoring by imposing conditions. We can hold people longer for gun crimes, and that allows us to put the evidence together for the court. So clearly that's the intention, to give us more tools and to increase the detection rate.
Any other questions? Sir?
Mr. DeSilva, looking at the statistics, sexual assaults, robberies and murders have doubled in this quarter. It's probably one of the most concerning areas, I guess. But in terms of reasons for that, you touched briefly. I wonder if you could just expand and say if the police are doing anything differently in the next quarter to try and address that.
Well, certainly that's the whole point of putting this report together, is to have a barometer of what's happening in the community with crime, and then we put plans in place to address. Now that's slightly retroactive, I appreciate, but we've had our gun and gang strategy in place since the first of this year, and that's where our priorities lay. Now, if there's an increase in street robberies, we'll be taking a close look at that. Is that gang related? Is it acquisitive crime driven by the recession? And once we have a clearer picture on that, we can put strategies in place to deal with that. But, you know, sometimes an increase in a crime category relates to an increase in public confidence. So, you know, other jurisdictions have experienced that when they start to have very robust community engagement, which we've had since December of last year, public confidence in the police ability goes up, and they're more likely to report crime that otherwise they would not have. Now that's, again, a little bit anecdotal, but I can support that with our calls for service. That's in the report. I don't have it in front of me, but our calls for service are at an all-time high. Now, I can't break that down into specific categories, but what I can tell you is the police phone rings more now than it ever did before. So it tends to suggest that the public are more apt to report crime that before went unreported.
To piggyback on what Simon just asked, we have had suggestions from gang members that a lot of these home invasions and so on are in fact related to, as you suggested, gang activity and the economic situation that we're facing right now. We need to understand that these home invasions are in fact gangs trying to raid drug dealers, basically rob drug dealers if that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to make a blanket statement that could be applied across the board, because every case has to be dealt with individually.
But has your intelligence perhaps reflected that?
Certainly, what I can say is home invasions and robberies are about acquisitive crime. It's about getting property. So it's either to fuel a drug habit, or it's drug related and you know, debt related and things like that. I mean, that would be a fair comment, but I wouldn't want to apply it to every single case.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Sullivan, you say that the calls for service are up, and you've spoken of very robust community engagement since last December, but certainly recent polls have shown that public confidence in the police and fear of crime, they still seem to be experiencing problems in those areas. What would you say about
Well,
that?
the fear of crime is understandable. It's a realistic fear based on the gun crime, and that's the one that poses the greatest risk to public safety. I'm not going to sit here and profess or claim a victory that all other crime is down, but all other crime is down. And that's why we try as best as possible to add some perspective to the numbers. I understand the increased fear of crime that's driven by the volume of gun crime. I'm disappointed with the confidence figures, and what's confusing is that doesn't bear out with our experience in the affected communities. Back in December, I made a commitment that we would empty Prospect. We've got every last available police officer on the beat in the troubled communities. That's where they're required. And I again, I don't have the evidence to back this up, but certainly the feedback we get in those areas is a lot of confidence in the public, a lot of satisfaction that we've turned up our profile in those areas. Now, does that mean that by focusing our energy in the affected areas, are we actually taking away from the other communities that now feel that we've neglected them? I don't know, and that's one of the questions that we're asking through those surveys and follow-up surveys, so we can be really clear on what the public concern is, so we can respond to it.
Okay, we're gonna take 2 more questions after me. Sir?
In relation to the increase in firearms offences, I wondered whether you felt that the increase, not just in the number, but in the kind of areas that have been covered. Obviously, there's certain areas in Pembroke that have seen a kind of a prevalence in firearms activity, but it seems to have spread over the last 2 quarters into areas of St George's and also Sand. Is that something you feel that is the case? Has it spread to further afield, or was it always there?
Well, I think the facts, play that out. So there's no denying that it's. I think the modern term is going viral. It's now no longer limited to certain areas. It's becoming perhaps more random than we saw last year. But the players are the same, and the issues are the same. So we're still not at the point where we've lost control as a community, and I know I'll get criticized for that one, because it seems like we have, it feels like we have. But this is just a clash of gangs and gang members over various different issues, which you would need to be a sociologist to understand, and we're grappling with the enforcement side of it. My message to the community is there's a whole raft of front-end work that needs to be done to reduce the violence and take the heat out of the issues that these gangs are clashing over.
Okay, 1 more question.
How has the police relations with the neighborhood watch improved or increased or decreased over the last few months since you put this surge on the street?
It's improved, it's increased. I'm sorry I don't have the numbers. I would guess it's better than 90 community watches. Sergeant Alex McDonald, which would be your point of contact if you want to verify that. So we've got more neighborhood watches now than ever before. We've got community action teams well entrenched in the affected neighborhoods. We've had those in place for almost 2 years, and certainly since December, we've redeployed them in a very concentrated way to troubled communities. Which is why I say it's so disappointing that the poll numbers tend to suggest there's a drop in public confidence. But I can tell you that the areas that we're policing robustly, there's a lot of confidence for the work that we